I have a form of face blindness, and I also have dyslexia, so naturally I wanted to know if the two were connected, and yes, they do appear together. However, no one is entirely sure why, and part of the reason for that is because all forms of face blindness are not the same, nor are all forms of dyslexia. Now, the above picture was used in a study of face blindness, trying to figure out what the different forms of blindness actually saw in a face. I can tell the difference between each picture, but if you showed me one of them and then the same person again with a changed trait, I probably would not be able to tell you what's different. Now, dyslexia does not just come in one flavor. There has been research that's found that people who have dyslexia are more likely to have a vivid three-dimensional space in their head, the ability to rotate objects. Remember, not everyone can even come up with a picture in their head. This may be linked to the hyperactivation issue. So if you have a deficit in one area, you then become stronger in another to compensate. And just as a little bit of a fun fact, when I was a kid, I used to mix up V and B. So I would say bacteria instead of bacteria, or atmosphere instead of atmosphere, which is kind of cute, but probably an early indication that I actually did have dyslexia. Now, for people who have both, it's believed to be a pattern recognition problem, which is weakly supported. So you may not pay attention to each individual word, but you've gotten better at pattern recognition, so you might be relying on context. This feels familiar to my method of learning. If I'm going to learn a topic, I learn everything about it. And then if I'm reading a new paper, I already know the basics, and if there's something particularly new about it, then I can zero in on that difference. But the general information is going to remain the same. Those differences in how you learn are also going to be reflected in the brain, with hyperactivation of some areas and less activation in others. Our brains are not so much hardwired from birth to be able to do things as much as they are just malleable, and we learn to use our brains over time. This is, by the way, likely the same reason why you can pop a mouse in a virtual reality and it can learn to move objects with its mind or teleport, because we're just using our brains and adjusting them to the task at hand. Now, face blindness is specifically associated with fusiform defects, or the fusiform gyrus, the location in your brain where we process images of people's faces. I will say that I've talked to other people with face blindness, and they definitely do not come all in the same flavor. Some people just can't see the face at all. It doesn't make sense. I can see a face, I can even draw it from memory, but assigning that face to a particular person is difficult. If I run into a family member and I wasn't expecting to see them, so it's out of context, I may not recognize them or may not recognize them immediately. So I tend to compensate, so I know somebody has red hair, I know they're relatively short, I know that their hair is short, and I will assign a name to that person. But sometimes that doesn't work. Yeah, I've had a lot of awkward encounters where somebody that I should know knows who I am, and I just kind of pretend that I know who they are until I figure it out. It did really shock me that most people can recognize their childhood friends as adults. So you know what they look like, and you know who they grew to be, and that's not a problem for you? I do have the question, do you have dyslexia or dyscalculia? Dyscalculia being the version of dyslexia that specifically affects people's ability to do math, and can you recognize faces? Can you recognize someone who is familiar to you out of context? Could you recognize a childhood friend as an adult? What have you learned to help you compensate for these issues? And I hope this was interesting. Follow for more.